In my previous career, before we launched Lucie Content, I was an anchor reporter at WSB. WSB stands for Welcome South Brother. And in 2011, when I did one of my first reports over here on the west side of Atlanta, it was anything but welcoming. I looked around and thought to myself, no one should be living like this. Well, that was then, and this is now. And in this series, we are spotlighting the amazing work of the Westside Future Fund with their CEO. Lucie, the name means light. The majority of our team has worked in newsrooms throughout the country. We've seen the negatives. At Lucie, we explore the positives. And through this video series, we spotlight them. People, places, businesses, nonprofits, you name it. Storytelling is at the heart of our company, and we know sharing a story makes connections. It's simple, informative, and empowering. So without further ado, let's go. All right, we're here with John Ahmann. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
This is great. You and I go way back. We're here at 395 James P. Brawley, which we've seen incredible transformation.
Right.
Tell us about what you guys have done with this particular development.
Yeah, this is a real anchored development for us. If you and I had been standing here back in 2016, I don't think either one of us would have felt particularly safe. It was an abandoned multifamily. It actually had tunnels through it, so illegal activity could occur without people being seen from the street. So when we acquired it, back in 2018, we wanted to redevelop it really for the community. And it was a real big test for us because there was a lot of suspicion when we first started. What is the Westside Future Fund really about? Is it really about the community, or is it just, showing up to do a big kind of gentrification play and really not have a mind to the people that are living in the community? So when we developed this, one thing that's really special about it, we could have torn it down, right? It was in horrible shape when we purchased it. A for-profit developer very likely would have demolished, because saving it, and part of what we heard from the community was, we want to preserve the historic character of these neighborhoods. So doing the renovation work was important to preserve the look. So you can see we preserved the original buildings. To build community, we put porches on them, and this was a parking lot, right? And again, back to building community, you can see what it is now. The parking now is behind. And we, when we acquired it, we had an announcement with, she just got an elected mayor, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and then she actually then came to the ribbon cutting. And what was very special when we redeveloped this is we prioritized people from the community to go into these units. And most of the folks who are here are paying a rate they can afford, but then we subsidize the rest.
And so how many people are in here now?
31 units.
31, and it's full?
And it's full.
Yeah. You mentioned something a second ago about, like, you guys were not well received initially because people, their red flag was up.
Yeah.
And so how did you kind of change that perception?
Yeah, well, what was really important to building that trust was to deliver on the things that we had heard from the community. And so we first started, a lot of properties, I know we're going to talk more about James P. Brawley, but on James P. Brawley, we're blighted and abandoned. There are some homeowners living here, and some still do, but there's also, along with that, unfortunately, a lot of illegal drug activity was occurring. This area was especially notable for drug trafficking. And so when we started, the concern of the community was, are we really going to be about rebuilding community, or just kind of, coming in and just pulling a bunch of people in from outside, to live and redevelop the community? The way you build trust is to really show people what you do. And so this is a great example because it reflected what we heard from the community. We preserved the units as opposed to doing a demolition. You can see it's a low density. We did high quality. And we prioritized people from the community to go into these units. Imagine if this had gone a very different way, how it would feel to the community if we had demolished this and if we had built something more akin to what you would see on Northside Drive with all the new rental going up. So something very modern looking. We could have done probably 4 stories here, right? Put a lot more density here. So imagine how that would have shown up to the community if we had done that. It would have confirmed their worst fears. You're not here for us, you're here for you.
Right.
And so the very experience of this, right, and people in the community can see it, and the people that are living here, that's how we build trust.
So what have some of these residents told you? I mean, they recognize you. What are some of the words that they share with you about the Westside Future Fund?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, it runs the gamut. So when I'm walking around multifamilies or neighborhood, I'll have folks that we've been fortunate enough to work with to help, maybe with housing. They'll say, well, thank you. Or we'll say, hey, I've been calling your property manager. I've got this issue. It hasn't been addressed. So it runs the gamut, but certainly probably more appreciation for the collaborative relationship we have with the community and working with folks. But certainly too, people are quick to point out what we can do better as well.
So right now we're walking along James P. Brawley
Yep.
right here, and why was this area so important for the Westside Future Fund to focus on?
When we started our work back in 2016, when I first started the Westside Future Fund, we were doing and co-sponsored with the city a land use framework plan. And the community, as we prioritized in the neighborhoods, the community said, James P. Brawley, this is a real spine of English Avenue, and prioritizing this corridor is what the community said. And it's a key corridor. It goes all the way from Donnelly Howell, and if we just kept on going south, you'd wind up in the Atlanta University Center campus. So it's the real spine of the neighborhood, and we couldn't, when we started our work, English Avenue, it was probably 3/4 depopulated, meaning most of the land was vacant, much of it blighted. So most of James P. Brawley looked like what you see across the street.
And that's a private owner?
That's a private owner. And they now have, plans to redevelop it. But we couldn't do everything at once, right? And so the community said prioritize James P. Brawley. And so we did. And so we, over time, I've got a great team with the Westside Future Fund. Over time, we were able to buy up about 40% of the properties on this part of James P. Brawley Drive. 395 we just toured was our first one. And now we're very much about activating, all the assets we own on James P. Brawley. What we want to do, right, is encourage others who own to do something. And so now that there's more activity, that's exactly what we're seeing happen. And we'll have some other examples of it. But what was really important when we started was ensuring people, as the revitalization took hold, that people from the community could participate and wouldn't be pushed out.
I remember coming over here and doing a lot of stories about, you just mentioned that vacant home, and there were some groups that owned 150 plus homes at the time. Mayor Kasim Reed was very involved in trying to clean this up. I actually saw him in court where the guy who was facing all these code violations, he was there. I was like, Mayor.
Rick Warren.
What are you doing here?
Right.
Since that court case, and there was a lot of media attention because they were dilapidated,
right,
and code enforcement was coming here and citing them. Nothing was really changing. So what has happened since then?
Well, it's gotten much better. We actually have purchased up over 40 acres of blighted, undeveloped land in English Avenue, Vine City. We've purchased a fair amount of Rick Warren's holdings. Is people like Rick Warren own the property. They had private property rights. You're just not allowed to go take their property, even if you don't like their behavior, like the way they're doing things. So when we wanted to go about our work, what we had to do was, and we were very fortunate that 10 Atlanta corporations created an investment fund that then loaned money to the Westside Future Fund at very cheap rates. That allowed us to go acquire a lot of land so we could go buy from Rick Warren at a price he was willing to sell. So part of it was, as much as you may want them to do different, much as you may want them to give you what they own, they're not, they're private property owners. And so we bought up a lot of land from outside investors, and then this is what we turn around and do with it. So this is a renovation. You can see this one's for sale for $325,000. When we develop a home, we price it at our land cost and our development cost. What did it cost to buy the land? What did it cost to renovate the home? And that's what we listed at. We prioritize people that have a live, work, learn connection to the community. And once someone qualifies for a mortgage, we offer up to $60,000 of down payment assistance for someone to go into this home. So what will probably happen is the buyer of this home will probably have a mortgage of around $240,000, $250,000, because our down payment assistance will help. And that down payment assistance is earned, which is really important, because they have to be in the home for a full 10 years to realize the full benefit of that. If they move out the first 5, they got to pay us back, because we don't want to encourage flipping, and then it burns down after that. But what's also really important with the community retention guidelines is people that have a connection to these neighborhoods, whether they grew up in the neighborhoods, or they worked in the neighborhoods, or graduate from the local schools, as we come rebuild the community, they got those historical ties that they bring with them, and a lot of love for the neighborhood. I live in Vine City, and you look around, there's a lot of activity, but there's still a lot of challenges. And so for people coming in now, they're really building that community, as opposed to probably 5, 7 years from now, when the neighborhood will probably be in a much different position in terms of a lot more people being in the neighborhood and a lot more amenities existing in the neighborhood.
I want to touch up on something that you just said. I mean, you're the CEO of Westside Future Fund, and you really practice what you preach. For our viewers, explain when you moved to Vine City and how much has transformed over the time since you moved in over here.
Yeah, we have a core, how do you develop a community that Dr. Martin Luther King would be proud to call home. And what I'm really inspired about our vision statement is he did. So he lived in Vine City with his wife Coretta and his young family at the time before he was assassinated. And when I started to work at the Westside Future Fund, taking a lot of inspiration from him and many others, I really wanted to, if I'm going to be leading an organization that's helping rebuild community, felt like I needed to be in the community to do that with authenticity. And so really to be also inspired by the legacy of Dr. King, I bought a home on Sunset and moved in 2019. At core, the Westside Future Fund is about rebuilding community. And as the leader of that organization, and to participate, the authenticity to really live in the community that we're trying to help, rebuild. And so, I bought a home on Sunset to be really inspired by the legacy of Dr. King, and I've lived on Sunset since 2019. I moved over from the east side. I grew up in Druid Hills and had lived in Decatur before I came here. So what also moving the community really has taught me is what it feels like to live in a disinvested community. What it feels like when you walk by blight and abandonment, what it feels like when you feel like people really aren't paying attention to your suffering. So it's been a deep learning for me to be in the community, to learn the challenge that people face day to day, not just with the physical condition of the neighborhood, but the mental toll it takes on you.
How rewarding has this been for you personally, just to see the transformation happening on the West Side?
It's been enormously rewarding. It really has been rewarding to see through the, I'm coming on 9 years with the Westside Future Fund, but just literally the thousands of people that I've met along the way and how many people care about making these neighborhoods a better place. It's been inspiring so many, residents to see, their resilience, their hope.
As we continue to walk north up here on James P. Brawley, here we have one of your signs, another one just a few doors down from the home that you just pointed out. When is this one going to be complete, and what's the story at this particular property?
Well, this one will be ready for move-in in the next couple of months. It's very nearly complete. This is another renovation. The renovation is actually by one of our not-for-profit partners, Oaks ATL. They actually have their headquarters in English Avenue and do great community work as well. And we're already actively, once my home gets this close to being complete, we're already trying to find people to buy the home. We don't list our homes on MLS. We can sell our homes very quickly if we listed them on MLS. But back to that intentionality of our community retention guidelines is we're circulating now. This home is coming online to the community. We're going to the schools in the area that have folks that qualify against our guidelines. So we're very intentional about marketing homes to the areas where we know folks meet our guidelines. But come back in 3 months, we should have somebody hopefully sitting on the front porch saying, "Hey, I saw your video, and that's why I bought this home."
We just saw the last home, this home as well. It's all part of the Home on the West Side program.
Yeah, Home on the West Side, which is really the signature program of the Westside Future Fund. At core is community, retention, and so the Home on the West Side has 3 components. One part of the Home on the West Side is our anti-establishment tax fund. So for legacy homeowners, and there's some that are on the street, and we define legacy as 2017 or before at a certain income, we pay all their future tax depreciation. Their concern was as homes like this come online, their assessments will go up, they couldn't afford to stay. So that's one component of Home on the West Side. Our next part is what you just saw, 395 James P. Brawley. High quality, affordable rental. When we started our work, a lot of folks had affordable rental, but it was because the units were in such horrible condition. So they would pay $500 a month, $600 a month, but
it wasn't livable.
It wasn't livable. And so the other part of Home on the West Side is developing high quality affordable rental, like 395 James P. Brawley. And the last component is high quality affordable home ownership. And we now assisted close to 50 homeowners, which also include police officers and firemen as part of that as well. We have enough land right now to do another 200 or so single family, but Home on the West Side is all those components with folks have a live work learn connection to these neighborhoods.
All right, we just left this home. It seems just this whole area is dotted with Westside Future Fund homes. So
Yes.
Tell us about this. This is a great area too, because you have this home and that other blue
Historic
home.
Westside Gardens in between.
Yeah, the gardens are great. Let's check it out.
And this is a great example of, our community retention guidelines brought to life at 454 James P. Brawley. Back to that live, work, learn connection. The work connection was a fireman who worked in, on the west side.
What's great about this home is a firefighter lives here.
Yeah, and he worked on the west side, so he qualified against our community retention guidelines, back to that live, work, learn connection. So he had already had a lot of passion for the neighborhood because he had worked at the fire station just on Joseph E. Boone. And part of his story too is, he's teaching his son, this is, in his own, what he shared with us is, what was important to him owning a home is also important to teach his son about the importance of owning a home as a way to build wealth. And that's one important part about our program, is by ensuring people who have a connection to these historic neighborhoods really get to share in the rise of the tide. Because part of the justice for me is if people, here had to kind of bear the suffering of it, when things turn around, it seems right and just that they get to participate and, things get to a much better place.
So Thelma just said she lived here for 50-something years. What's the change been like over here on the west side?
Oh, there's been a lot of changes. Now, everything is looking up. It's looking the homes are fantastic. And in the west side of the front, they are they got things started. So now we are happy to say, I know just right now,
So Thelma just said that, since Westside Future Fund's been around, a lot of changes for the good, and she said that it just makes her proud to say, hey, I live on James P. Brawley, and amongst all the beautiful homes. I mean, that's awesome.
No, and she helps educate all her neighbors about the history of the street, because she's got, right, because you got new neighbors and you help them appreciate the history and culture of the neighborhood.
Oh no, it's, I enjoy coming out of my home now, and I'm looking at all these pretty houses, but they are beautiful, and just the people are just as nice.
Wonderful. And I'm sure you hear that a lot too.
No, it's very rewarding, and it's a reflection of a lot of people really caring about these neighborhoods, and a lot of people, supporting the Westside Future Fund to, help rebuild communities. You can see a wonderful advocate for the neighborhood. She's a great example. She's in our anti-displacement tax fund, and so she wants to stay in her home. She has no desire to sell. So she's a legacy resident, and now she's got new neighbors. But whereas before she might have been challenged because her taxes are going up and up and up, and whether she could afford to stay or not, now she can. And what I love about it, and what it's taught me too, is a lot of folks talk about preserving history and culture. But the best way I think we as people learn about history and culture is from each other, through the stories we tell one another. And so she has that lived history, and to really bring that alive. And so as new people move in, to kind of give that history and what's happened here and why it's important to our city. You just can't replace it.
Speaking of history, tell me the history on this park right here.
Yeah, you asked me earlier about Rick Warren, and when we bought out some of his holdings, this was among the holdings that we bought out. And Rosario Hernandez, who now runs Historic Westside Gardens, a not-for-profit, she does, you can see, community gardens in the neighborhood. So we own the land, but we lease it to her for $1. And again, back to the holistic nature of our work, it's about rebuilding community. And so she's often out here. She actually has people in the community, as part of her team that do the work. They also bring in a lot of volunteers. But you can see they're also very intentional about growing. This is a food desert, and so growing healthy food and vegetables. And a couple of our multifamily properties, we work with them that we have community gardens on site as well, for people to be able to grow their own food. So it's again just a great partnership as we think about that wheel of all the things that go into rebuilding community, especially a community grounded in compassion.
I see the Westside Growers Market sign there. It says Fridays 2 to 5 p.m. Of course, right next to it, Westside Future Fund. What is it like out here on a Friday between 2 and 5?
Oh, you'd see a lot of folks inside here. As they're, kind of, especially now with the growing season being what it is. But if you came on a Friday, you'd see a lot more activity.
Yeah. How big of an asset has that been for all these neighbors?
I think that, an enormous asset is not just the food access, but, the aspect of being able to reconnect with the land, reconnect with growing, what that just does for you physically and spiritually. So it's not just about having healthy food, but also, participating with your neighbors in a community in a way to, back to building community. What I love about seeing this, you can see, the growing right here, and it's, to me signifies, life-giving, nourishing. Unfortunately, if we were to take a right down jet and go about a half mile, you'd see flowers, but unfortunately marking where someone was shot and killed. Right, and so, to me, part of the journey of these neighborhoods, in a way, it's that metaphor of resurrection, of things being, reborn in ways that are healthy and sustainable, as opposed to, taking life. Because unfortunately, the violence in these neighborhoods, which is much less, but still too much, a lot of lives have been lost.
Yeah, and I remember it was years ago. You text me at like 4 o'clock in the morning,
right?
And you had two people, I believe, were shot right, a doorstep away from your house.
Yep. No, they started the yellow line right on my front porch, and when I went outside, I saw two young men were face down dead. They had literally just been executed, and I'll never forget it. They had just graduated high school. I remember I went out into the street, and people were gathering, and there was a young man. I started talking to him, and he said he was from Oakland City. This was 4 in the morning. I'm like, well, what are you doing here? And he said, well, that's my brother face down. And then in the morning he was, sat at the spot his brother had been killed, but just the senselessness of it. And what really stuck with me, I had lived in Decatur. And if something like that had happened in Decatur, the whole city would have been what just happened. Next day, nothing. I mean, just the violence in the neighborhoods unfortunately had become normalized. No one knocked on my door, and so that part too is just the tragedy of we've gotten used to this.
And that would have been in 2020, I believe.
Yeah, it was the peak of that,
during COVID, and
right.
And what's transpired since then.
No, it's, and unfortunately what happened during COVID and living in the neighborhoods, I would often hear gunshots is, the prevalence of people owning guns, often illegally, but nevertheless, and then especially during COVID when people lost their temper, right, what happened? And especially young people, rather when I was growing up, maybe you have a fight, but you don't shoot each other. And so there was just too much of that. And a lot of kudos. I know our current mayor has done a great job, and really, there's much less of that today than there was back then, to that point. But still, just that, the tragedy of that, yeah, sticks with me.
So Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, he's really has these initiatives to clean up areas like this. Tell me about his blight tax.
Yeah, really appreciate the mayor's, leadership. One of the things we found on James P. Brawley and other parts of the neighborhood, as you're looking to rebuild the neighborhood, you would have investors who refuse to sell and also refuse to keep their property up.
Yeah.
And they could become sites of criminal activity. They affect their neighbors, like Ms. Thelma Renault.
Yep.
And so what the mayor and the city council introduced last year was a blight tax for vacant property, not if you live in it, vacant property that's blighted, that if, and it meets the condition of blight, the city can now institute, they have to go through a process to prove it through municipal court, but if it gets designated under this new blight tax, their taxes can go up about 30 times. And the point of that is to incent that outside investor to do something, either redevelop it yourself or sell it. But what's so challenging, right? When stuff is blighted, when the neighborhood's on the move, it holds other people, down. And so part of what was intended to that was to incent people to either develop or sell. So this is an example of, someone, with, thanks to the city's leadership, we were able to buy this. And so you can see we own it. We've secured it. We keep the lawn mowed, and we're planning to renovate this and bring it back to life. But part of what the blight tax did was to encourage people by increasing their holding cost, to do something different.
Speaking of securing this, I want our viewers, listeners, just to hear about this. I mean, this looks like a bank door.
Yep.
Along with the windows. I mean, these aren't bars. This is thick metal.
Yeah.
What goes on if it's not secured like this?
So what goes on, and the most tragic, and it literally happened 2 weeks ago, if they're not properly secured, is that unfortunately there's still drug dealing in this neighborhood. Unfortunately, there's still people addicted, and likely homeless, living on the street. And they'll go into something like this if it's not properly secured. When it gets cold at night, they might start a fire inside by peeling the plaster or the wood, and then the house burns. If they're high, they don't get out, and they die with it. And that's happened too often in these neighborhoods. So they become sources of criminal activity, whether that be prostitution, whether that be drug selling, whether that be drug doing. And so when we buy a property, most investors will just put wood paneling, which is very easy to pry off. When we buy a property, we put the highest level of security paneling on. And you can see it's very challenging. You'd have to really want to be in this house to get.
I know.
Now, and you can also see the lawns recently, mowed.
Yeah.
So when we buy a property, and this is, again, why I have a lot of appreciation to Atlanta's, philanthropic community, our philanthropic donors, is that as soon as we buy this property, we pay higher taxes because we get assessed at the buy price. So when we're paying higher taxes on an abandoned property, we pay for this to be kept clean, and we pay for the security paneling. So our holding cost on our vacant portfolio is around $800,000 a year. It incents us to want to keep it moving along, but it also shows the challenges of taking on these kind of neighborhoods, because without that philanthropic support, there's not a lot of market incentive, right? So anyway, but yeah, but bad things happen if you don't properly secure the property.
Well, we see the Atlanta Police Department security camera right there,
Yep.
right in front of this property as well. You've seen a lot of those go up.
Yeah, no, and initiative led by the Atlanta Police Foundation, which has done a great job putting a lot of these cameras up around the neighborhood, and also Vine City. Just down the street, literally less than a half mile, is their First Step Promise Center, which is in the neighborhood. They're officers that are living in the community. I think we've seen a few police cars drive by. I think it's likely of officers who are going to their homes that now live in the community. So the Atlanta Police Foundation really was, sponsored the first, activities in the neighborhood through officers moving into the community, as well as, launching the at Promise Center.
We're coming up here, St. Mark's Church. We've also done a story with you all over here at the church. You guys have events. What all goes on here at this church?
This is actually now a historic, landmark recognized by Atlanta City Council, and back in the day, an AME church. What's so fascinating about the history of these neighborhoods is this church was initially a white church that transitioned, when the neighborhood transitioned to a black neighborhood, transitioned. And when the church left to another part of the city, Winston Taylor, who's another Atlanta, native, in the late 90s, he was able to buy and really, his own story, really felt called by God. So purchased this from the AME church.
Yeah.
And what he wants to do, because part of what the community has heard, is activate it as a community asset, so as a placemaking. So imagine, what just happened here, concerts, festivals inside the church, but it's amazing inside because it's, open air. And so he has a not-for-profit that he founded called the Beloved Community. And again, bringing this online in a way that supports, a lot more, activity at this historic corner, Cameron Alexander and James P. Brawley.
So we've since moved, but we're still here at the corner of James P. Brawley and Cameron Alexander. You look down this way, you can see Coca-Cola headquarters.
That's right.
Downtown Atlanta in that area. This particular store, the Yarrow grocery store, we were just talking, shut down in
very historic
2019. And what's going on with it now?
We're waiting on we've applied for a permit to begin renovation activity. So Craig, a year from now when you come back, we'll be able to go back to outdoor seating and have a cup of coffee.
Nice.
So we will be beginning work in the next probably 30 to 45 days. This is a really important intersection. Back when this neighborhood was a vibrant, populated neighborhood, this was had a grocery store and a restaurant, and upstairs were multifamily, 4 units of multifamily. So this was built back in 1910. It was owned by the Cottrell family. When the family had exited, they were leasing to somebody who unfortunately wasn't policing what was going on in front of the store. So part of the reason we again bought it was not only bring it back to life, but to shut down the drug dealing that was literally, if we'd been here in 2018, they would have been standing right there. And when we bought the store, I'll never forget, we were putting out a press conference, and Michael Bond, who's on the city council, grew up in the neighborhoods, his father, a very, very famous civil rights leader. But I called him for, by being in the press release, and he said, "Well, you're going to tear that down, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Why would we do that?" He said, "Well, I know so many people have been killed associated with violence from that store." And so for him, it was a traumatic memory. And I'm like, "Well, could you imagine it reopened in a different way? It looks different, serves the community a different way." And he said, "Yeah, okay, I can." And maybe when we open it, we can have a prayer ritual to remember all those that lost their life in violence associated with activity. But on the other hand, right, people can remember when it, was back
what
to
it used to be.
It used to be, and so, that's what we. One day we're very intentional about, bringing someone into the store that offers, fresh food to both, purchase both, prepared and some kind of small grocery.
The Westside Future Fund, it was founded in 2014. Tell me about the significance of the name, how you all are funded, and how our viewers, listeners can help.
Yeah, at the time the Westside Future Fund was launched, it was from an organization actually I used to be the executive director. It was called the Atlanta Committee for Progress, where business leaders, corporate leaders, university presidents, and others would work with the mayor to improve the city. So it's very much active today. But as the ACP got when Mr. Arthur Blank and Kasim Reed announced the location of the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, very interested in what can we do to help support the rejuvenation of these neighborhoods. And so we worked with the ACP to really think about what kind of organization was needed to help drive long-term revitalization. And that was from learning from best practices, not only in our city, but other parts of the country. And from that, the Westside Future Fund was born. It was actually, I remember, the mayor at the time, Kasim Reed, actually, had the name the Westside Future Fund when we were launched. Part of the challenge of the name can be with the word fund in it. You can reasonably expect we have a lot of money, but we're, every year are actively fundraising. So we were not launched with an endowment, right? Every year we're raising funds both to, our operating costs as well as all the philanthropic capital we raise to support the kind of things that you're seeing. It's a separate, fund I mentioned earlier with, 10 Atlanta corporations putting together an investment fund. But that's really meant to assist, with the property redevelopment. So understand, people often think we are like a foundation that gives away money every year, and we're not that. So I answered a really long answer to the question.
Who are your big donors? How is this all possible?
Yeah, we have a great donor pool. Back to the the history of the organization being launched. We have a lot of great donors from a lot of businesses and business leaders of this city. So certainly the Arthur Blank Family Foundation, Mr. Arthur Blank's foundation. Another company, obviously he co-founded, is a big supporter of our work. The Home Depot and the Home Depot Foundation, and one of our top corporate sponsors, Chick-fil-A, and the family has been very active, along with all the folks, many others that work with Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy, in particular, and a lot of Atlanta's leading corporations are supporters of this effort. You mentioned Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, the Home Depot, Truist, the lead contractor for the stadium, Holder Construction, is been deeply involved in the work. The Georgia Power Southern Company, Equifax, ICE, Cox Enterprise, back to your date. So a lot of Atlanta's leading corporations who really appreciate the importance of these neighborhoods to having a great city have been big supporters. Atlanta's independent foundations have notable ones like the Woodger Foundation, the Campbell Foundation, the Toll Foundation, and then we have a lot of individual supporters as well. And our board of directors is a volunteer board of directors. Some of our best individual donors also serve on our board of directors, so they give not only their governance expertise but their personal support as well. And we also we don't directly the organization does not directly receive money from the city, but we often partner with the city to help deliver affordability. So Invest Atlanta has been a big supporter with their tax allocation grants to help deliver affordability, and some of the property they bought they leased to us for $1. Atlanta Housing has been a big supporter of our work as well, and certainly all the things the city is doing and investing in the neighborhoods to bring a higher quality of life is important too.
So for our viewers, listeners, they can go to your website and donate as well.
Yeah, so we'd love, every month we host a Transform Westside Summit. Starts at 7:45. It's at the Gathering Spot, not too far from here. But we'd love to host people if they want to learn more about the work. It's a very diverse meeting, and it's a great way for people to get plugged into the work. We have a Westside Volunteer Corps, so you can go to our website, sign up for our Westside Volunteer Corps. Every Saturday, once a month, we sponsor some kind of volunteer activity in the neighborhood. So that's another way to get involved. And yes, we have events people can participate in as well. So we have coming up in September our Ride for the West Side. So another way people can get involved. And certainly we would love for people that have philanthropic resources that they want to contribute. And we take all levels of donation, appreciating that people are at all different stages of life. So we just appreciate people's being in their gift. But if they want to go and contribute, to the work that we're doing, that would be awesome.
Perfect. Well, there you guys have it. You can definitely help out the Westside Future Fund. John, thank you so much for being on the Lucie Spotlight.
And thank you.
Congrats to all the work. Thank you for what you're doing for our city.
No, thank you. And I want to just express my gratitude. You've done an amazing job storytelling, lifting up the Westside Future Fund. We were, particularly, blessed because we initially met where you're going to help us. We had, at that point in time, had done enough work to begin the storytelling, and you were such a support. But then COVID happened, and we
had to go virtual.
And we were gifted because you actually got us live and coached us, and we were like a leading everyone's like, what are y'all doing? And it was thanks to you because you advised us on how to go live and how to do it.
We have a great team.
But it was a great model at the time, so thank you, because we stayed engaged thanks to you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is amazing. Appreciate it.
Our mission is simple: create your news. When we create it, we hope to spotlight your purpose. Life's too short to be stuck in a world that becomes stale. What's your purpose? Are you living it? If not, the time is now. Thanks for listening and watching. Carpe Diem.